thank you, Bob. As Bob mentioned, my name is Mulready, and I'm an attorney at the Rhode Island Disability Law Center. We are a federally funded nonprofit law office that represents individuals with disabilities exclusively. There's a law office like ours in every state, and for the last 35 years or so of our existence, representing students with disabilities and helping them access a good education has been a priority for us. So we have some history in Rhode Island of working with students with disabilities and some history in terms of thinking about what has been working, what's worked well, and what hasn't worked well. And so I think, you know, when I've been doing this work for a little over 20 years myself, and when I think about, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, the things we were excited about were the degrees of integration of students with disabilities with their peers and classmates, and Rhode Island was making some good strides on that. We had learned to be independent. So, you know, we're a little frustrated with sort of our change in policy that has had not only a dramatic impact on students with disabilities and how many of those students will graduate, but also about the quality of services and supports that they're getting from districts. And I think the two are related. So many of you may know this fact, but 83% of students with disabilities in the class of 2014 are at risk of not graduating due to their math NECAP scores when they were juniors. So that's really distressing, and ironically, you know, we know there are studies out there that say that the vast majority of students with disabilities, probably 80 to 85%, should be able to achieve at the same level as their peers. So we almost have the exact same number who are not achieving and not being allowed to graduate. So we know right off there's something wrong with that number, it should be the reverse. We should really be seeing maybe 50% of students with disabilities who can't achieve at the same level of their peers. But equally as disturbing, we know that the gaps between students with disabilities and those without widening at all grade level when we look at their NECAP scores. So we're not helping even younger children perform better if we use NECAP as a measure of performance. So these results aren't really surprising given what we know about how students with disabilities learn. We have studies that show that students with disabilities really need to be able to demonstrate what they know and what they have achieved through multiple means, or multiple measures is the word that's often used. And the results are also not surprising given what we know about how districts are responding to the need to gear up and make sure that their students can demonstrate proficiency on NECAP. So I think parents report to us, at least, that many of their children with disabilities are left out of that gear up process. Either gearing up is happening at such a pace that their children can't keep up with it, or they're not even offered the same and equal opportunities to participate in sort of those gear up boot camp kind of services that some schools are implementing. So studies have, in addition to some of the negative consequences that Rick was talking about high-stakes testing, studies have shown that for students with disabilities, high-stakes testing have increased unnecessary grade level retention and have also increased dropout rates. And we've known that for a significant amount of time. We've probably known that for at least the last 6 or 7 years that those studies have been around. When No Child Left Behind passed, and that's the federal act that required Rhode Island to implement a test like NECAP, not to use it as a high-stakes test, but just a test like NECAP, I think people in the disability community had very high hopes that you know, No Child Left Behind would pick up where IDEA left off, and that IDEA year had succeeded to some extent in making sure that every child with a disability had access to a very individualized education plan. So that was very useful, but I think what some people were feeling they were bumping up against was the ability to access the general curriculum, to make sure that students with disabilities had access to the same curriculum as their peers, and that that curriculum got taught and modified in whatever way was necessary so that a student with a disability, for instance, could take Algebra 1, could take Algebra 2, and learn the content of that material. So unfortunately, though, No Child Left Behind has not been really that successful nationally or in Rhode Island in doing that, I think, as the NECAP test results show. And it really has, at least in Rhode Island, contributed to greater disparity between children with disabilities and children without disabilities. We still hear that students with disabilities are not getting access to the accommodations that have been identified as needed, sometimes in classrooms, but certainly on the NECAP exam itself. And we still hear stories about students with disabilities not getting access to the specialized instructions that would enable them to be successful with the curriculum and on the test. I think perhaps even more troubling, in addition to those sort of keeping kids with disabilities from graduating and having successful potential lives, I think what really surprises me is that we are undermining the progress we have made. So not only are we taking away the opportunity for a diploma, but we're also in some ways taking away the other kinds of things that enable students to be successful, like their opportunities for integration with their peers that we know really contribute to students with disabilities having successful adult lives. And we're also taking away, we hear reports from families about children with disabilities in high school not being able to access transition services, either because the district itself is not offering as many services, they've kind of rerouted their resources in a different direction, or because the student themselves is so busy doing whatever they can to prepare for the NECAP that they're not able to find the time in their day to take those services. So in addition to screening kids with disabilities out and not giving them equal access to a diploma, we also feel like the emphasis on testing and high-stakes testing is leading to, is making Rhode Island lose traction on those things that it had been good on in terms of integration and in terms of transition services. So it's kind of like a double whammy.